A note to my YouTube subscribers and occasional viewers, this is my very first YouTube video, a partial text and image video, where I am incorporating the content of another YouTube video. I think this is especially important today as a much better YouTuber, Carl Benjamin, has done a faced video in spelling out in commentary the dangers of mass multicultural immigration to white America, in regard to the New York City mayoral election. Please do visit Carl's channel homepage and watch the full video. Cheers! It is about weaponizing foreigners against the natives.
This and the following voice is synthetic. See Carl's video for his actual voice. The normie American rights are freaking out about the election of Zohan Mamdani or something like that because he represents a tidal shift away from American politics as it was traditionally done. Now, American politics as it was traditionally done was done in a certain way, but there was always a kind of unspoken assumption of demographic superiority and demographic inferiority. So you have ethnic voting blocks for minorities and non-ethnic voting blocks for the majority. And the majority, of course, were the white Americans. And so the ethnic minorities were kind of dependent on the white Americans. But that paradigm only continues as long as those demographics hold true. And in the case of New York, well, in the last 20 years, things have changed. And so you can expect the politics to change with them. I mean, Zohan himself is an immigrant to America. And what he has done is built a coalition of foreigners to gain political power in New York over the native-born New Yorkers. And I saw lots of people posting stuff like this. This dude's closing pitch ad is literally him speaking Arabic in front of the Palestinian flag. Yeah, he's a foreigner. They're all foreigners. Don't you understand what the demographic changes in New York have wrought? Like, this is genuinely his pitch and his constituency. And it turns out that his constituency is larger than the native white population of New York. Now, what has happened in many places in Britain, such as with our Gaza MPs, is happening in New York. And it's happened to what was it? One of the first or second largest and most important cities in America. This is your future, just like it's happened here. These people didn't need to integrate because you brought so many of them in such large numbers, and you allowed them to concentrate themselves in particular areas, and they realized that if they have been given the franchise, which for some reason we just give everyone who comes to our countries the franchise, that they don't have to vote for you. They don't have to vote for Andrew Cuomo. They don't have to care. And I saw a lot of people saying, well, look, New Yorkers have forgotten 9/11 because they've elected a communist jihadi. And it's like, I don't think you understand the people who voted for him were not in New York in 9/11. They were not there at the time. Those people have left by the most part. And these are new people who are not only not American, but don't care about your sacred cows. They didn't care about 9/11. If anything, a lot of them would have been on the other side of that question and not have appreciated America's response to it. They're there for prosperity. They're there to take of yours what they can take. And this couldn't be more explicit in his acceptance speech. Like, this is crazy how explicit and on the nose this is. He says this movement was made by Yemen bead owners, Mexican albiers, Senegalese taxi drivers, Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian lime cooks, and Ethiopian aunties. But not Americans. There are no Americans involved in this, because what this is a coalition of foreigners conducting a kind of intersectional jihad against the native population of what's left of the native population of New York. They realized that actually we can form our intersectional coalition, a racial coalition of every race against the white man, and we can win. And so what that means is the structures in place in New York that were set up by those people 50, 60 years ago, when New York was like 97% European, well, they're all things that they've been on the receiving end of. I mean, as Stix Hexenhauer, questionable spelling, puts here, this movement was built by people we exploited for decades as service workers. Yeah, but it turns out they can vote. And it turns out that if you have a socialist who's like, you know what, there is actually a shared class interest amongst all of these non-white races, then these can be stitched together into a coalition and thrown as a weapon at the establishment. Now, I'm not even saying it's not justified to do this. Everyone is aware of the rent prices in New York. Like, my God, and all the everything there costs a huge amount. And everyone is aware that that is the case. And so I'm not saying that there isn't even a legitimate argument to be made there. What I'm saying is these people will make it on their terms and not yours. And I swear to God, it was so weird watching people like Ted Cruz, the kind of normie Republicans, being like, well, this seems like an easy one in New York City. Vote for a Democrat. Just a Democrat who until yesterday were the most evil force in the world, or an actual communist jihadist, a literal Karl Marx quoting American-hating jihadist. Well, let's look at the demographics who vote for him, shall we? As you can see, it's only white men that basically didn't vote for him. White women barely, but black men, black women, Latino men, Latino women, all other 58%. Like this was a collective assault by the Global South on the traditional governing structures of New York against the First World. This is them saying we want your resources. And of course Zoran has been saying all sorts of crazy things like we're going to, just all sorts of hyper-socialist things. And this is what has led Ted Cruz to be like, well, I mean, aren't you worried about like an actual Karl Marx quoting jihadist? It's like, not really, because that's not something they care about. Like a lot of the immigrant groups, if we go back to his list of people who are that made the movement, do you think Yemenis, Mexicans, Senegalese, Uzbeks, Trinidadians, and Ethiopians care about communism? You think they care about jihad or Islam? Do you think they care that what you say is bad is the prejudice of white Protestant America and what they think is bad is what you are? And they're opposed to the way that you do things because these are people I don't know whether they notice from deeply tribalistic societies, not from individualistic Northwest European Protestant societies. These are people who do not agree with the way that America is run. They're just here to collect what they can out of it. And so what Zoran's pitch basically is that we have the power to drain the established capital out of New York City and redistribute it to ourselves. And they're going to do that. This is going to be what happens. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't going to have second or third order consequences. It obviously is. But why is this possible? Especially as in Minneapolis, you'll notice that the Democrat beat the immigrant. Well, how did that happen? Well, let's look at the demographics. In New York City, 30% of the population is non-Hispanic white and 37% is first-generation immigrant. So, okay, what's it like in Minneapolis? Well, it turns out 58.1% of the population is non-Hispanic white and a much smaller percentage, something like 14.8% were not born in the United States. So, the attempt in Minneapolis to collectivize the immigrant community against the Native community, and again, not just the white Native community either, failed. The same brand of, immigrant communism, Islam communism is going to be on display here too, but it didn't work unlike in New York because the demographics didn't permit it. But when the demographics do permit it, you're going to see that because they don't care about the things you believe. They don't care about any of this nonsense about like Karl Marx and jihad or anything like these. These are your scare words. These are not their scare words. To them, they're thinking, right, okay. So, we get to take something off the white man, do we? Brilliant. We're going to fill our pockets because you have allowed us to gain the political power to do so. This is the problem with uncontrolled mass immigration. You allowed them to set up their ethnic colonies, their enclaves in New York City, and all it took was some guy like Zoran to go around and go, yeah, well, you know what, guys? Collectively, we can take power from the white man, and we can just pass any laws we want. Remember how corrupt it was back home? We can do that here, and they will. Now, there will of course be second and third order consequences to this. There will be things that happen and come further down the pipeline. The question is Zoran smart enough to know that that's going to happen? because a lot of people comparing him to Sadiq Khan, and I think that's unfair to Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is not an idiot. He is evil. And he, therefore, not being an idiot, understands that if he goes full communist, which I'm not saying he wouldn't like, he will cause a massive collapse in London's economy. Well, Zoran, I've only seen a little bit from him, but he doesn't seem that smart. And he seems to genuinely believe the Islam communist line that he spouts constantly over and over and over. And so I think he will go balls to the wall on this. And honestly, I'm kind of for it. Let it happen. I'm sorry if you're a New Yorker who wasn't in favor of this. I'm sorry this is happening to you, but New York's been going downhill for a while now because of the changing demographics of the city. And unfortunately, you're just going to have to be used as an example to the rest of us, because now you have the full spectrum narrative of the left that has been projected to a bunch of people who are not smart enough to understand that there are going to be consequences to this and they're going to have to live through the results. I just want to be clear, demographics is destiny. And it is not a coincidence that these people fled impoverished and corrupt countries. And when they arrive and they set up their ethnic enclaves and they vote for a person who is going to just essentially turn their city into a giant flaw, spelling basically. It's going to just replicate their host countries. New York, if he does what I am expecting him to do, will just turn into a collection of third world towns, townships, and they will have exactly the kind of quality of life that you would expect. The people are responsible for the conditions in which they live. And so once they've drained the remaining capital out of New York, it will become exactly as you would expect it to become. And to be honest with you, I think we need this as an example. We need a good example of what this new left, this new socialist left, and one thing that the white socialists have failed to understand is they think it's class solidarity that has created this. No, this is racial solidarity. This is a racial maneuver against the white population of America and particularly New York. This is not about class. This is about race. And that's the way this is going to play out. And unfortunately, you're going to see the consequence of this. And I think it's going to be exactly as the Republicans in America are pointing out. Look, the consequences of what you're going to do are going to matter. There is an ethnic dimension to all of this. And I bet that white people, the remaining white people in New York, just start leaving. There's going to be a huge amount of capital flight from New York. And then the revenues won't come in and things will stop working. And you've got to remember that basically everything this guy was doing was kind of ethnically coded anyway. When he was saying, look, violence is an artificial construct. Prisons are a form of oppression. We need to abolish them. That's very ethnically coded. He's not talking to the white population of New York, which is disproportionately underrepresented in their own prisons. He's not talking to those people. He's not helping those people. That's not what those policies are aimed at. They're aimed specifically at the immigrant minority groups who have now become collectively the majority. And so, yeah, if you're a white person in New York, I'd get out. What are you staying for? That this coalition specifically is racially targeting you to take your stuff. And it's barely even concealed behind ideological rhetoric. That's the thing. It's barely even concealed. So, this is what you're going to get. And the thing is, what's funny about this is what Zach Palinski is trying to do in the United Kingdom. Now, our problems are also similar. And the Green Party will do this in certain areas, but I don't think it'll be nearly as extensive as what's going to happen in New York. But this is what the plan has been from this campaign. This is what all of this is. It's about weaponizing foreigners against the natives. And we're going to see the results of this. And like I said at the beginning, I don't think fetching over this is actually a good thing. I think letting it play out is the important thing. There's no point campaigning against it because you have no way of campaigning against the immigrants who have come in. They don't share your worldview. They don't share your presuppositions. They don't agree with you on things. They don't want to be a part of your culture, which is why they're replicating their home cultures in your country. So honestly, Watching him make an absolute hash of it might actually be a very good and instructive lesson on the dangers of mass immigration itself. Actually, the immigrants can just take over. They can just choose to elect one of their own, and they can just choose to enact policies that are designed to immiserate the white native population of that city and benefit themselves. And this will only last until the white native population just decides to leave to save themselves from this kind of ethnic persecution. So, like I said, I'm actually not upset about this. I'm sorry if you live in New York, but this has been going this way for a long time, and this is the inevitable conclusion of that. And it's good to have it out on the table. It's good to have some honesty on display. It's good to see them forming coalitions of foreigners and saying, no, we're just for foreigners against you, against the native population of this place. And so it's honestly not a bad thing that this has happened, and it will be very instructive for the future.
Carl is English and he is commenting on what has already happened in London, where central London is no longer a white majority city for several years now, I gather. NYC will now be hollowed out as a balkanized collection of non-white ethnic centers as the white and money populace flees elsewhere. Thank you for watching my video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share.